Okay, everyone, welcome to this session. We'll get started now, and maybe some people will be joining us. So hello and welcome to the session on Landslides, the Next Frontier of Hazard Early Warning. My name is Miriana Budimir. I'm a Senior DRR Advisor at Practical Action and also a knowledge broker for the Science and Humanitarian Emergencies and Resilience, or SHEAR programme. I'm really happy to welcome you to the session today. We will be recording the session, and just a reminder to mute your microphones unless you're about to ask a question or speak, so that we have less background noise. Submit. So this session is going to consist of a series of lightning talks and presentations from the SHEAR programme projects, Landslide and Landslide Evo. We'll then break out into groups for follow-up Q&A and discussion. If you have any questions during the presentations, please make note of them and then save them for the breakout group discussions to ask them directly then. Afterwards, there will be an opportunity for a platform for you to access to ask any questions that you weren't able to ask during the session. So there will be follow-up opportunities if you don't get an opportunity to ask all the questions you want to. So I'm looking forward to sharing with you and having a great conversation and discussion afterwards. So let's get started. Bear with me on the technical issues. Hopefully this will work just fine.
Good morning. My name is Emma B and I work for the British Geological Survey. It's a pleasure to be here today at Understanding Risk, and I've been asked to set the scene for this session, which is the provocative title, Landslides, the Next Frontier of Hazard Early Warning. First of all, landslides are a global phenomenon. They are frequent and, as this image shows, widespread. Rainfall is the main trigger for landslides, but they can also be triggered by seismic activity and are also induced by human activities such as mining, construction or engineering. Landslides are also responsible for considerably greater socio-economic losses than is generally recognised. As Dave Petley describes in his 2012 paper in Geology, this is in part because, unlike for many other hazards, there has been a lack of systematic data collection about landslides and their impacts, but also because many multi-hazard databases generally classify the trigger, for example a tropical cyclone, rather than the cause of death, such as a landslide. Increases in population, coupled with human activities such as deforestation due to logging, burning and development are factors that increase the potential for landsliding in susceptible regions. So why are landslides the next frontier of hazard early warning? Well, in recent years, partly because of the Sendai framework, landslide early warning systems have received increasing attention amongst government officials, decision makers and the public, as well as within academia. So by 2030, the Sendai framework aims to achieve substantial reduction of disaster risk, so reducing loss of lives, livelihoods, as well as economic, physical, social, cultural and environmental assets. Landslide early warning systems, which form a non-structural risk mitigation measure, can have lower environmental costs and sometimes lower economic costs to other mitigation measures. As such, many decision makers regard them as an effective tool to achieve the aims of the framework. And early warning systems in general are mentioned in the 7th target, as can be seen in this slide. Yet very few countries have landslide early warning systems, as the availability of robust and good quality data to support their development is often lacking. So what is a landslide early warning system? Well, early warning systems in general are used to generate warning information in a timely and meaningful manner for wider dissemination and to facilitate better preparedness and response. In general, landslide early warning systems are all systems which support the monitoring of one or more variables which trigger landslides, and this is generally in the form of rainfall thresholds. You can have local landslide early warning systems which operate on a single slope, or regional, or sometimes called territorial landslide early warning systems. These operate over wide areas, so at the basin, region or national scale. There are also many community-based landslide early warning systems that have been developed or piloted around the world. The UNDRR highlight 4 key components for a successful early warning system, which are shown here. I'm a co-PI in a 4-year project called Landslide, which is funded by NERC and FCDO in the UK. And this is developing a prototype regional landslide early warning system in 2 case study areas in India. Irrespective of scale, landslide monitoring and dissemination of warning information remains a complex process where technical and communication skills should work closely together. So to achieve the 4 elements that the UNDRR highlights here and ensure action has impact, in Landslide, so our regional forecast model, we are ensuring that there is a convergence of knowledge from meteorology, geomorphology and geology, as well as knowledge from local practitioners to support better understanding of people and cultural dynamics on the ground and within the communication system. This diagram illustrates these points further. The Landslide early warning system in Landslip brings together data and expertise within social, meteorological, geological and practical knowledge to develop a forecast showing the likelihood of landslides in 2 case study areas. However, in order to translate this knowledge into something that is useful, usable and used by the end users, it has been imperative to co-produce deliverables with NGOs and the target end users in an interdisciplinary and inter-organisational manner. This ensures that the risk knowledge is disseminated and communicated effectively, but also enhanced and sustained through local engagement. So in terms of the question this session poses, landslides the next frontier of hazard early warning, I encourage you to stay in the session and hear from the other presenters so that you can begin to formulate your own response. Thank you for listening and I hope you enjoyed the session.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Mauro Rossi from the Italian Research Council, and I'll give you a general idea on how landslides can be forecasted regionally. A landslide is defined as the movement of a mass of rock, debris, or earth down a slope under the influence of gravity. This clear and compact definition hides a huge process complexity. If we take some of the main landslide characteristics and we analyze their variability, we observe a huge variation. How could a single forecasting approach account for this process heterogeneity? As you could imagine, this is a really difficult task. When we analyze the possible spatial and temporal forecasting scales, we need to consider even the landslide process scale. Indeed, the number of landslides, the landslide lifetime, the landslide's type, among the other possible characteristics, change depending on the selected scale. This implies a large forecasting modeling complexity, making necessary to use diversified approaches to forecast landslides with different data demand. Local forecasts made for single landslides or single islet use instrumental data, commonly measuring ground deformation and or other significant process parameter variation over time. For regional forecasts, such kind of data are not available. We only have landslide inventory maps and catalogs, which commonly report the location, areas, and more rarely the time of occurrence of landslides. This is why local forecasts are generally done through monitoring of a landslide feature or kinematic parameters, such as the ground displacement, while differently, regional forecasts monitor a measurable potential trigger that is related to the landslide occurrence, such as the rainfall. Local forecasts attempt to predict the landslide occurrence or activity on a specific instrumented location. They do not provide information outside the instrumented area, and in general, the forecast model calibration requires detailed local data knowledge. This kind of forecast can be easily interpreted, and it is possible to implement automatic warning generation. Conversely, regional forecasts attempt to predict the possible landslide occurrence over a large area without the indication of the specific location. But it's possible to forecast widespread catastrophic events due to specific triggers, such as a rainfall event. This at the expense of large modeling uncertainty. It is difficult translating such kind of forecast into warnings, and it is even more difficult to implement meaningful automatic warning generation. Despite these difficulties, it is possible to forecast landslide regionally, but there are still a lot of challenges. Thank you.
Good morning, my name is Claire Dashwood. I'm from the British Geological Survey and I'm going to give an overview of landslide susceptibility mapping in the context of landslide early warning systems with a few examples from Landslip. Landslide susceptibility maps are a quantitative or qualitative assessment of the spatial distribution of landslides which exist or potentially may occur in an area. In the context of an early warning system, susceptibility maps form part of the risk knowledge of a study area. In a regional landslide early warning system, the rainfall threshold will help constrain when a landslide will occur, whilst a susceptibility map will highlight areas where failures are more likely. However, they give no indication of magnitude of landslides. It is worth remembering susceptibility maps are static and could potentially be affected by climate change or construction, for instance. When choosing one of the many methods available to produce a susceptibility map, be it qualitative or quantitative, it is important to consider a number of factors, and I have listed some of these here. Consider what method is appropriate for your study area, and this will be different if you are working at a local or slope scale to national scale. What resources, computing power and time is available to you? Data availability is key. If you don't have local expertise, you may not consider a heuristic approach as appropriate. Statistical approaches require a good inventory and spatially variable data, whilst a deterministic approach relies on adequate geotechnical and hydrological data being available. Moving on to the input data for your susceptibility map, it's really important to understand what the conditioning factors for your study area are and not just use any data that is available or can be generated from a DTM. Consider if it's relevant for your study area and the landslide process that you are modelling. What I've done here is I've listed the 3 most common groups of thematic variables that are used in landslide susceptibility maps. In landslip, we considered 3 landslide processes: slides, falls and flows, using a statistical, simplified deterministic and a conceptual model to produce 3 susceptibility maps. For slides, we utilised the CNR model Landsuite, which includes a validation module. It is essential in any study to validate your model, and there is a wealth of literature on this topic available. It's also important to consider the mapping units of both the susceptibility map and the landslide early warning system. Are these pixel, slope unit or administrative district, and are they comparable on scale and resolution? Thank you.
Hello and welcome to our lightning talk on weather patterns and landslide forecasting. In the next 3 minutes, I will showcase how we have related specific weather patterns over India to landslides in the region and have used this information within a medium range forecasting tool. So what are weather patterns? Well, in the context of this research, a weather pattern can be described as one of many circulation types over a defined region, which differs in its characteristics from other weather patterns over the same region and can vary on a daily basis. Here I have an example of a common weather pattern transition over India. So here we transition between 2 different active monsoon types, and we can see that there's subtle variations in the wind speed and direction which cause changes in the spatial extent of the rainfall, and then we finally transition to a break monsoon type. Of course, all these transitions can have implications for the likelihood of landslides occurring. The weather patterns used in this research are the set of 30 patterns shown here, which were produced through cluster analysis of historical wind data. And you can see the rainfall climatologies are plotted here, and there's good variability between patterns, which is good to see. And of course, rainfall is a good indicator of landslide risk. We know from this work which weather pattern occurred on each day historically, and we can cross-reference this information with records of landslides to identify a list of high-risk landslide weather patterns. So in this work, high-risk landslide patterns are those which contribute the most rainfall in the 15 days leading up to each landslide event. And we complete this analysis for each individual landslide event, and then we get all the data at the end where we can objectively identify a list of high-risk patterns, and I'm happy to discuss more about this process in the breakout room afterwards. We can then combine this information with probabilistic weather pattern forecasts, which are driven by ensemble prediction systems. So we can see here 3 transitions highlighted in the forecast. These are the transitions with the highest probability. And then we can present that forecast slightly differently. Here we are presenting the same forecast, but instead we are showing the probability of the high-risk landslide patterns occurring only. We can see the high-risk patterns shown at the top of the table, and we can see at the end of week 1 and into week 2, we have higher probabilities. And a landslide did indeed occur on the 9th of July. Thank you for listening, and see you in the breakout room for discussion soon.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Alessandro Mondini, and I work for the Italian National Research Council. This short talk has been prepared together with Christian Annard from the British Geological Survey, and it will introduce the breakout discussion on data needs and what we can do with what we have. One of the goals inside the Landslide project is the definition and the implementation of a forecast model for rainfall-induced landslide at different spatial and temporal scales. This is quite a hard task for many reasons, including that landslide can be very different. They can be small, large, slow, fast. They can occur singularly or in groups triggered by the same hazard, and their studies require different approaches and data. So, the type and the density of the requested data to forecast landslide are not known a priori, but strictly connected to the type of process to investigate, the trigger and the spatial and temporal scales of analysis that can be connected to the user needs and expectation, and they determine the choice of the models. On the other side, a completely data-driven approach defines or constrains a priori on what is possible and what is not. This is preferred when a huge quantity of data is already available, or simply because it is not possible to gather new information. Our solution has been to find a very difficult and delicate compromise based on the intersection between data and models that required data cleaning, homogenization, integration, and models adaptation. From historical landslide events, historical rainfall records, geological information, land cover, rainfall forecast, we obtained static models to estimate slide and debris flow susceptibility and to simulate rock falls. We also obtained rainfall quantitative that trigger landslide in the past and short and medium range landslide forecast models. Our current framework is mainly data-driven, and it reproduces and simulates the same space and time lattice of the historical data. A very important result that we are trying to achieve is also to have operating procedures for new data collection, to evaluate the quality of the products, and to recalibrate the models. We are now supported by a large network of trained organizations devoted to collect new data. And we are experimenting the use of crowdsourcing, hubs, unconventional remote sensing analysis in the microwaves to complement the classical field surveys followed by the Geological Survey of India. Thank you for your attention and hope you will enjoy this section.
Hello, my name is Arnulf Schiller. I'm a hardware developer and geophysicist at the Austrian Geological Survey. I want to point your attention to a low-cost multi-parameter monitoring system for which we had the opportunity to develop it in the course of the project Landslide EVO, led by Imperial College London. Since 2017, we work together with our project partners in the region of the Karnali River Basin in far western Nepal. First of all, to mention the geological department of the Tribhuvan University, led by my colleague Professor Meghraj Detail. Initial field trips concerned on-site inspection and first measurements for acquisition of prior data. Methods applied comprise differential INSA technology with different satellite sensors, on-ground geoelectrics, UAV, photogrammetry, differential GPS, and rock sampling with analysis in the laboratories in Vienna. Here you see poster, very small written, but if you zoom inside you get a lot of the details, and of course we can discuss later on about it. Result of these field trips and data analysis is the design of a monitoring system which is tested and prepared for Pachedi Landslide. It consists of a spaceborne component based on Sentinel-1 satellite sensor data and SHEAR processing platform which is freely accessible for long-term observations of ground deformations. And a ground-based sensor network based on the Raspberry Shake units, especially these sensors bear the potential for early warning capability. Third component concerns the inclusion of the local community for supporting with citizen science tasks as simple water analysis. To conclude in short here, low-cost spaceborne services and ground sensor technologies are combined for a low-cost, high-sensitive monitoring system with the potential of early warning. The components are tested and prepared for Pachedi and waiting for installation after the COVID-19 lockdowns. The Geological Survey of Austria would be happy to support and transfer developed expertise to Nepali partners. I want to thank for your attention and all the partners and supporters of this work. And I'm very keen to discuss further details with you in the aftermath. You will find in the appendix of this presentation more material as links and references. Thank you a lot.
Hello everyone. This is a small presentation from some of the members of Landslide project on the role of social sciences in developing a landslide early warning system. We represent a small group of social scientists working in Landslide project, which aims to develop a prototype early warning system for landslides in 2 study sites in India. Through this presentation, we wish to share some of our learnings. Here we highlight 3 significant tasks carried out by social sciences in Landslide. Number 1, understanding the existing institutional landscape of disaster management in the 2 study sites and broadly at the state and national level, in which the proposed prototype landslide early warning system is to be introduced. This exercise helps in preempting the opportunities and challenges that the proposed early warning system is likely to encounter when introduced on the ground. More importantly, thinking about this institutional landscape dynamically requires engaging with the institutions and understanding their strengths and weaknesses and the capacities and support they would in turn need. Number 2, social sciences also helps in reflecting on the learning trajectory of the institutions which are member of the project and are growing in the process. For instance, in Landslide, Geological Survey of India has been a significant organization which is the nodal agency for landslide early warning in India. Keeping a track of their learning trajectory during the course of this project helps in gauging the full impact of the project, which might not be evident immediately. Number 3, social sciences also plays a crucial role in facilitating the process of knowledge co-production in an interdisciplinary project like Landslide. This includes engagement within the consortium members as well as with stakeholders on the ground. This task is in equal parts a learning process and a trust-building exercise between the consortium members and the local stakeholders. Thank you so much for listening to this brief presentation, and if you wish to learn more about how social sciences have contributed to Landslide so far, please do join us in our breakout group. We would share more of our learnings there. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everybody. I am Dr. Shoibal Ghosh from Geological Survey of India. I will be delivering a small talk on SHEAR program Landslide and our experience. GSI started interacting with the PIs of Landslide in 2015. GSI's roles and responsibilities were formed up in 2016. Landslide proposal was submitted to NARC by the PIs with full cognizance of GSI. And we started working in Landslide project after signing an agreement with British Geological Survey in August 2017. Now, why GSI? Landslide has selected GSI as one of the consortium partners because GSI is a premier geoscience organization in India, having rich knowledge and data. It has a strong legacy of landslide studies since 1890, has mapped almost all the landslide prone areas in India, which is nearly 12.6% of the Indian landmass, maintaining a rich national landslide geodatabase, has a large number of fleet of geoscientists working in landslides from different offices across India. Moreover, Government of India has already identified GSI as the nodal agency for landslide hazards in the country, so its roles, responsibilities and mandate are well defined. GSI works intimately with the apex body, National Disaster Management Authority, state governments and other stakeholders on all issues of landslide management. Now let us discuss a brief on the achievements. Landslide has already developed a prototype model which is put under testing now. Model evaluation started. Legacy material compilations has also been initiated, and also the process of transferring the legacy to National Nodal Agency is also being planned for future implementation. So as a whole, Landslide is a complete project, not only involving research and development, but also prototype deployment and developing a strong legacy for future implementation. The lessons what we have learned on data requirements, mainly the prototype model can be improved further with new data. Prototype model also needs stringent evaluation before making it operationalization. Availability of landslide date, time and spatial locations are important issues. Data availability in India is challenging because the cultural variability and diversity in understanding varies from state to state. But the role of implementing agencies, that is the state governments or the provincial government, is extremely important. LEWS also requires skills and data which may not be available with a single agency. So successful LEWS implementation requires multi-institutional input. But most important factor here is that involvement of a national nodal agency like GSI actually ensures safe transfer of legacy and knowledge for such an international project, and also gives a state level assurance for real world applications. It has also developed a smart legacy planning program which is working as a roadmap for seamless process of transfer of technology. Flexible and futuristic legacy documents is being prepared which will help in real world applications. E-workshop right shops plan, which is a very befitting tool in today's challenging world. Nodal agency aids in accessing the vital government data also. This is also very important for land. Thank you and please stay safe.
Hello everyone, I'm Jonathan Paul, researcher on the Landslide EVO research project, and I'll be discussing the use of citizen science and participatory monitoring in landslide early warning systems. So when we say citizen science in its broadest sense, we refer to the involvement of non-scientists in scientific research. Now, this has the potential not just to enhance data collection greatly in space and time, so densifying data points, but also when combined with a risk reduction and resilience building approach, it can enhance community engagement and educate and empower local stakeholders. On the left-hand side is a conceptualization of citizen science as divided into 4 levels, depending upon the level of non-scientist involvement. Now, in Landslide Evo, in the research project, we discovered that level 4, which has been called extreme citizen science, is the most impactful type of citizen science, and it involves the intrinsic involvement of non-scientists throughout the entire life cycle of a project. So just from the very beginning, problem definition, through data collection and analysis, all the way towards the dissemination of information. When designing citizen science research projects, it's very important to follow a very careful social science-led setting. So one needs to identify the shared space between what can be scientifically offered, so supply, and what is actually needed at the community level, so demand. And it's important to bear in mind that whatever early warning system or product may be generated, it's important that it's actually locally relevant, useful, and usable, so local people will actually make use of it. So some examples of what we've done. First of all, we've worked very closely with secondary schools in order to collect crack propagation data and rainfall data. And this is because they're an excellent place to conduct citizen science activities, because they have a rigid hierarchy already in place and a high degree of social capital. And at the same time, as scientists, we can go in and teach the students. There's a kind of quid pro quo. You know, we enhance local STEM learning, which builds capacity in the long term. Secondly, the use of mobile phones and apps is increasing in early warning systems, and it has to be designed with the users in mind, which often they aren't, often they're not used. So it's important to undertake some form of user testing prior to rolling out any app. Similarly, with sensor networks, it's important first of all to understand whether the non-scientists will actually take the measurements or whether they'll merely provide security and maintenance. One final thing which we have undertaken is community-led vulnerability mapping. So you can see some examples here. And this also trains local people in OpenStreetMap software, as well as fostering a greater understanding of hazards in the immediate locality. So I've referenced 3 papers here which have been published just in the last couple of weeks. My contact details are there as well, and I look forward to discussing in greater detail with you in the breakout rooms. Thank you.
This session will be focusing on how you go from complex physical science forecast information and data to appropriate, useful and usable information for decision makers, using the case study example of what we learned in the Landslide project, developing landslide forecast bulletins. So how do you do it? What are the processes to follow to develop good decision-making products? Firstly, you need to understand the context and your users. You need to think about who your users are. Institutional mapping can help here. For example, in most regional landslide early warning systems, these are typically civil protection or local municipal government. You need to understand what is useful to them. You need to take a co-production approach, working alongside and with your users throughout the process. You need to be clear on what the science can and cannot do, the uncertainties, and what is good enough for users, and be transparent with them. Who needs to be in the team should be established very early on, not only accounting for physical science skills and expertise such as hydrology, meteorology, geology, etc., but also a range of social science expertise and practitioner experience. I cannot stress enough the importance of relationships, whether building on existing ones or consciously and actively developing new ones, particularly through face-to-face meetings, field trips and working together. These will help develop trust and a deeper understanding and appreciation of the forecasts. Developing preparedness plans and protocols for issuing forecast information will save time, effort and reduce mistakes in the long run. And ultimately, it takes a long time to develop forecast information for decision makers. It is an iterative process and should be never ending. This is important for continually evaluating and improving forecast information you are producing. So what ultimately goes into the end product will vary depending on the context, the user needs and the science capability, but some considerations can include thinking about the formats. For example, is it PDF, digital, web-based, email, SMS, app or voice message? Think about the channel. Who is it coming from? Who is it going to? And how is it being transferred? Consider the trust between the producers and the users. Think about language, the literacy levels of users, avoid jargon, be clear, and think about the user's primary or native language. Think about effective use of visuals to convey spatial information or layering information, accompanying it with text, and think carefully about the use of colour. Think about the layout of the product, including summary information and controlling the flow of increasingly complex information. And finally, think about content and whether to include exposure, vulnerability, impact information, and/or advice. Creating useful forecast or early warning information for decision makers is challenging, but really worth the effort to ensure useful, usable, and used forecasts. Thank you, and I look forward to discussing this topic with you.
I think that's recording. It normally tells you. Seems to be recording. So anyone want to kick off with any questions for any of the presenters? Or each other? Right, there's one in the chat. Yeah, it looks like it's recording. Great. If you don't have any questions, I've got some. Oh, here we go. Dr. Basanta, sorry, I can't read your whole name on the thing. Would you like to ask a question?
Thanks. Am I audible?
You're audible. We can't see your face, though. I don't know if you've got a camera or if you haven't. That's
okay. Thanks.
Oh, we can now.
This is Basanta from Nepal. Particularly, I'm interested on this Landslide Evo project. If some colleagues are here, because they are working in the western part of Nepal. Is someone is here from that project or not?
Anyone from Landslide Evo?
I'm joining in the project.
There you go.
I'm Geological Survey of Austria.
Hi. I think we met in 2017. I don't know, but when you are talking about integration of these land slope deformation using different satellite imageries and GPS stations that you have some of your colleagues showed there, how are you planning to integrate that system on landslide early warning system? Is it only satellite based or is it physical based? What kind of early warning system are you planning over there?
In Pachedi? Yes, in Pachedi we are working on the with Sentinel-1A interferometric data, and this can be done everywhere. You can access it through the GTAP platform and do the interference pictures and also analyze time series. We are actually a little bit still working on that because you have to do some more correction. So the service doesn't provide all what you need to do to get good results. You need to do additional tropospheric correction or topographic correction to get best results. So this is still work in progress, but actually we prepared some corner reflectors. We can also work with the images with natural PSI reflectors, and yes, and so this is one part we can implement for all seasons observation, and the other part is differential GPS we do on site. So we do repeated measurements of selected points, and yes, this is something we just did for test measurements yet, and prepared for a monitoring system in the future. The equipment is already in Kathmandu since a year. We weren't able to go there because of COVID-19, and hope so we can eventually install all that the system with beginning of 2021. Yeah. And this is especially for Pachedi, but it's also so we have to get data, and also we are in the state to analyze the data and then to get information about significant data for getting trigger processes. Yes. I don't know if I answered.
No, I have a couple of other questions, but I'll let others to ask you. Thank you very much.
Okay, maybe I didn't understand all because I have some technical interruption, but we can also talk another time. Yeah?
Thank you very much. Does anyone? So Shadi, you've got a question. I think your hand's up. Do you want to put your video up if you can as well? No. Oh, no, it's not. I think the hand's gone down. Any other questions for any of our speakers?
Hey, hi.
Yeah.
May I put a question?
Of course.
For Miss Claire Dashwood, please, if it's possible. I saw that your point of interest are susceptibility maps, and I want to ask you two questions. First, when you are doing the susceptibility maps, are you making mapping on site before that for counting the landslides or measure them or something? And the second question is, how many factors are you taking in account when you are calculating the susceptibility factor? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that question. So it was actually the Geological Survey of India that had mapped the landslides, and they've done some mapping, so polygon based. So we had the inventory from them. So it is based on mapped landslide points. And I might defer to Mauro about how many factors were in the susceptibility map, because CNR ran the models using the GSI data. So I might switch over to Mauro if he wants to answer that one.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. It depends from we basically model the susceptibility for 3 different kind of landslide types, for slides, for flows, and for rockfall. And we use different factors for each of them. Slides was the easy one because we had the inventory map that was containing, as Claire was said before, was containing polygons of slide type landslide in the area, in the 2 study area actually, because there are 2 study areas. And we were using morphometric parameters derived from the dam. We tested several different DEMs to derive the map. Then we were using a sort of lithological information derived from the geology. Finally, we were even trying to use the land use. There was a really large phase in which we were evaluating the possible impact of each variable to the final susceptibility assessment. And there was a phase in which we were evaluating the significance of each of these variables, even trying to address the possible collinearity problems among the variables. This was for the slides. For the conceptual model for the flows, we were using, again, information on the mapped flows in the study area. And we were using substantially two morphometric parameters to derive the source area, that were the slope and the accumulation. And then from them, we were using a sort of a stochastic / probabilistic way to model the flows, starting from those source areas. For the deterministic modeling of rockfall, we start from a dam, and we were using slope to derive the source areas, and then there was the simulation of the runout. This is what we did there. So different stuff for different landslide types.
Is that okay, Emilia?
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for the question as well. We have about 5 more minutes. So any other questions from anybody? If not, I've got a question. I'm going to perhaps ask a couple of you to give your opinion to this answer to this question, based on your experience of working in SHEAR on these SHEAR projects, which has brought this session together. And I'd like to ask, what advice or lessons learned would you feed back to funding, research funding agencies to ensure that sort of future projects like this maximise their impact on the ground, and that activities are sustainable and in the long term and have longevity? So going beyond the research more to ensuring impact and a roadmap. We heard Sybil talking about having a roadmap so that they can take forward the learnings from the research. So I'm looking at Christian, Ali, Rob from a MET perspective possibly, and maybe Arnaud from your Landslide Evo project. So does someone want to go first, answering their perspective? Right, Arnaud's going, then Ali, then Christian.
Pardon? Again, I had some problems. My router is a little bit lousy.
Okay, Arnaud, I'll put the question in the chat, and I'll let I'll let Ali answer, and I'll come to you at the end.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, okay. Again, my impression, I think what would be important most is to, some people say, put the skin on the game, which means be part of the system. That makes successful what we are doing. So we have to take the responsibilities of what we do and what we propose. It's not just like an academy. So the way to make the SHEAR project successful in the future is to be responsibly involved in what we do. This is my personal opinion.
So you mean engaging with the end users and the stakeholders?
Yeah, right.
From the beginning all the way through.
The skin on the game.
Christian, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think what Sybil said, this roadmap is, I think, really important, but we have to be honest, this is something that developed over the project time. So this also brings me maybe to the point being flexible. So even if we started with some ideas in the beginning, we realized we have to change them, and having this flexibility is also really important. If we see we don't have specific data, we have to be creative somehow and deal with these problems. So this roadmap, this aim in the end, and how we can go in the future is important, but also being flexible and deal with the different problems that you realize during the project run. That's really important, I think.
Rob, from a MET perspective,
so from the UK Met Office's perspective, we've been working with lots of different weather data, so it's observations, so rainfall observations, and also NWP data for the forecast side of things. And we've developed our models and landslide predictions from these pieces of information. But it's really important to have the good collaborative relationships with project partners in the country you're developing the product for, so that you can easily share data. And then also, if you have a plan in mind for where you can deploy the final product, for where it's going to run. So we've developed the product at the Met Office running on servers in the UK. We developed the code, and obviously now we're at a stage where we want to have good legacy of our systems. We want them to keep running once the project ends. So we're very fortunate that we already have good working relationships with the National Centre for Medium Range Weather Forecasts in Delhi, and also the Indian Met Department. So we've been able to get in touch with them. They've given us their weather data. We've given them our sort of forecasting code, and they're now starting to work on deploying that their end. So we've always had that in mind for the long-term end of this, and but just having those connections is really important from early on.
Thanks, Rob. We've got 20 seconds, so Arnaud, do you have anything to add to that? If not, do you have anything to add from Landslide Evo? If not, we've got 10 seconds. So what I'm going to do is actually, sorry, we haven't got long enough. I think that's a lesson learned. We're going to be brought back to the breakout room now. So thank you all very much for presenting and for your questions. And please use the Padlet if you have any other questions. Some of those presenting will spend a bit of time having a look to see if there's questions on the actual presentations there and respond to those. I'm going to turn the recording off now, and I ask you all to leave the room to go back to the main room. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone. Okay, so people are still joining. We've got a couple more popping up. If you want to ask a question, you can either pop it in the chat box, or if you have the raise your hand option, pop that up and we'll kick off with some questions. Does anyone have a first question to kick us off with? Otherwise, I might pose one to the group. Okay, whilst we're waiting for people to think about questions, I've got a question for Anshu and Saibal. How has GSI, Geological Survey of India, changed over time, and what role has Landslides played in these changes?
I'll let Dr. Ghosh go first and then I'll follow.
Can I? Okay, thank you. Thank you. I have tried to write in the Google Doc. I don't know whether it is saved or not, but I can tell that some of the important lessons we learned through which we are actually making our future program. First thing is the understanding the criticality of the multi-institutional inputs which are required in LEWS, which is a very important aspect. Then importance of the institutional processes for data collections. There are a lot of challenges there, and also dissemination and communications. Then there is another important aspect which we are learning, the risk of forecasting in a data scarce environment, because we are facing some data scarcity in some places. So what risk is involved in forecasting there? And another very important thing, because as we in my presentation I have tried to tell that not all skills are available in one organization or one institute. So there are varied type of skills are required for a successful implementation of LEWS. That is also being learned through this program, through this research. And another very important thing is that perhaps we have to think over the data science aspects, data mining aspects, because here data actually playing a very important role. So that is also very important for evaluating, for making a robust model, which is our ultimate aim to make it operational. I think this much is enough for answer these questions, that what things we have learned and what has made some changes in our understanding.
Thank you, Saibal. Anshu, do you want to go?
Dr. Ghosh has already shared with you the specific lessons that GSI, specific trainings that GSI have undergone. From a social science perspective, what we intend to do is part of is an extended part of the initial task, which was in institutional mapping, which we realized that institutional mapping is not necessarily a static, but a dynamic exercise, and how the institutions in the process grow has an impact on the final early warning system, which will be operational at some stage. So capturing the learning trajectory thus becomes a part of the growth of early warning system in a way. So what we intend to do is a long drawn process from the beginning of the project till the later part of the project, by interviewing all the GSI colleagues and charting the specific, one is the specific learnings, and second is as an institution, what extra, I'll say, infrastructural growth the department might have undergone or plans to undergo because of the requirements posed by early warning system, would also become part of the impact of landslide in a way. So I think that would be the social sciences perspective on the.
Thank you, Anshu. Oh, okay, we have a question in the box. Okay, Question about citizen science. So this is going to Johnny. Regarding researcher participant dynamics during the engagement, are there any difficulties during the engagement, and what level of citizen science has been achieved for the Landslide EVO project, the citizen science component, if local participants continue using the co-products after the team is leaving? Johnny, can you answer that?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll have an attempt. So I'm actually a physical scientist, and the fact that I'm in a social science breakout group illustrates the importance of beginning with the social science when one is conducting citizen science activities. So we found that we really needed to approach local communities first before developing any kind of early warning system to work out what livelihood needs actually were, where the vulnerabilities lay. And we found it was important to approach citizen science with a degree of humility. So we found out that many community members weren't actually interested in an early warning system whatsoever, which was a little bit of a surprise. So we focused most of our efforts around participatory data collection programs, which had an element of two-way information flow. So local community members were able to collect information and data related to landslides like rainfall, which was very useful to us as scientists. And then on the other hand, they will be able to see how their data points have been processed, how it could go towards developing aspects of the early warning system. So this information is fed back to them. At the same time, we've been conducting various trainings and workshops which are action-based. So they're centered around things that actually matter to local people, as opposed to things which, as scientists from the West, we think should matter. So, I mean, it becomes a question of how much you want to engage local people, because I understand that one approach might be to say, you don't actually know what you need, and us as scientists, we're telling you what you need, you don't know it yet. So that's one very top-down approach. But we found the best way is to go in at the community level right at the very beginning, before any kind of early warning system is developed.
Thank you, Johnny. Really good answer to the question. Does anyone have any other questions? You can either post them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask them directly. No one's got a question to ask. I have another one for Johnny. So given your experience of working on SHEAR projects, what advice or lessons learned would you feed back to NERC or FCDO or other research funding agencies to ensure that future projects maximize their impact on the ground and activities are sustainable and have longevity?
Well, first of all, just building on my previous answer, in an ideal world, these physical science projects would be on an equal standing with social scientists. So there will be 2 leaders, 2 PIs, one from physical science, one from social science, which we didn't have for Landslide EVO. Another thing is to appreciate the importance of sustainability and legacy right at the very beginning. So if you're developing an early warning system or some new mobile technology, you need to work out things like how comfortable will people be sharing their personal information, their data, to try and make that as transparent as possible. And then how will it continue whatever early warning system is created beyond the life cycle of the project. So this is something which concerns me at the moment, that when the funding runs out, when the scientists leave the study region, which is Western Nepal in our case, then all of the learnings, all of the things that we've brought to people on the ground will just be lost. There'll be no legacy, and there won't be any point in it. So trying to embed the research in the community as much as possible is very important, and that requires an understanding of power flows, finance flows, who makes the decisions, who would be the most useful person in a community to engage with. So trying to identify social mobilizers within the community is very important.
Thank you, Johnny. Okay, we have another question. So what types of social science have been really valuable to this research for both projects? or what on reflection has maybe been missed and would be useful in the future to take the work from both projects forward? Gianni, do you want to go first, and then we'll reflect back on Landslide as well?
Sure. So the question is types of social science.
Yeah, types of social science that were included, that were useful, and was anything missed?
So problem was, as physical scientists, we initially saw social science as this big monolith. You know, we'll get the social scientists in. That's how we phrased it. And it became increasingly apparent that social science is every bit as subtle and complicated as physical science, right? I mean, it would be like saying, let's get the physical scientists in. You just don't say that. There are geologists, physicists, mobile technologists. So the problem that we've had is we've cycled through various social science researchers with different areas of expertise. So we have focused on the community level. So we've been doing things like vulnerability and capacity assessments, semi-structured interviews in order to understand livelihoods. But I think that the biggest outstanding challenge is how to integrate social science with physical science, because we've often been speaking to each other. You know, we use completely different terminologies and languages, and trying to bridge the gap is a more important contextual question to address than, you know, what type of social science. So I think it's really finding the overlap is the key.
I think if I could just jump in there, Mariana, as well, to build on that and say, it's not just about the types of social science or the language, like those are all issues. I think another issue that then builds on that is the timing of it, and the timing of when social science research is carried out and those results are made available to physical scientists, and the timing of when physical science research is carried out and those results are made available to social scientists. And I think that's a balance that can be very hard to find in terms of making sure that the results are usable and able to have impact by both parties. And I think that timing needs to be really thought about in terms of when we collect that data in order to then inform the next stage of the project.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. Thank you for that, Anna. Anshu, do you want to reflect on that as well?
Just a quick thought. I think well, there are many types of social science. I'll just switch off my camera. I think that way connectivity is a bit better. I think there are many types of social sciences, but generally in projects of this scale, it appears that anything that engages with society is termed as social sciences. So in case of Landslide, I think one thing which has worked for the project is in a way separating the social science practitioners from researchers. So the first benefit is the workload is divided, which is more practical benefit, but it also gives time for both the groups to engage with the community or with the stakeholders in their own ways. Like there's space for researchers to reflect on the engagement, while space for practitioners to think through methodologies of engagement. So broadly, these are the two types, if I might say, in the context of this scale. But yes, then again, there are many much more subtle differences that can be discussed in much further detail. That's from my side. That's all from my side.
Thank you, Anshu. Again, encourage anyone to ask any questions. We've got about a minute left, so if you've got any burning questions, do pop them in the chat. Otherwise, I might post a question to Anshu in terms of, did you observe any differences between what was recorded in institutional plans and documents compared to what actually took place for disaster management in India? Was that kind of difference between what's on paper and actually what happens in practice?
Well, there is a subtle gap between policy and action, and that has more to do with how the disasters are conceptualized for action. So the way it is conceptualized for action is deeply rooted in the institutions which have been in place for many, many years, whereas the policy and plan have conceptualized in ways which are directly borrowed from the international negotiations. So the roots of the two ideas, the two conceptualizations are differently placed. when we take these policies and plans and directly try to impose them onto existing landscape, institutional landscape, without understanding the context, we see a gap where policy becomes more of sloganization, where you see terms like risk and resilience and vulnerability being used, but the interpretation might change based on the socio-political context in which they are being used for action. So yeah, so I think there is a subtle difference there.
Thank you. Okay, we've run out of time for the breakout room, so we're going to go back into the main room. I'll see you in a second. Okay, we should all be back in the room again. I'm just gonna quickly share my screen. So thank you everyone for participating in this session. It was really good to have you all here, and I hope you have learned something or taken something away, and I hope you felt this was useful. We had a very limited time, so if you do have further information, further questions that weren't able to be answered in this session, please have a look at our Padlet. It has all of the videos that were presented today that you can rewatch or watch in your own time, and you can post questions in the comments there, so the presenters will be able to answer them in their own time, hopefully before the end of the week would be great. And if you want further information, please see our SHEAR website, including signing up for the newsletter to receive further updates. With that, I just want to say thank you, and hopefully see you all in the rest of Understanding Risk at the closing ceremony.